Norman Tebbit, is there a Thatcher factor in this election?
There's bound to be a Thatcher factor. There's a Kinnock factor too, no doubt about that. There's an Owen Steele factor. The leadership qualities of leaders of parties, of prime ministers, are always a factor in elections.
Well, the opposition clearly think there is, and they clearly think to some extent it's to their advantage, and in particular those two charges which you'll have seen in the film leading up to that. One was of the uncaring quality of the Prime Minister. What do you say to that?
Well, it's absurd, isn't it? And fortunately, to some extent, I think Mr. Kaufman was busy backtracking on Sunday and paying her a handsome compliment for her caring and compassionate side of her nature. And I think that's only appropriate. But I think they're on a very foolish tactic. The alliance started off with a good deal of abuse of the Prime Minister, and they don't seem to have done too well out of it. I don't think people like the idea of an official opposition spokesman saying that she's got an unbalanced mind, or one of their members of parliament saying that she's a crook and a cheat and a liar.
Not in this campaign.
No, not in this campaign, but there's just as many things being said about her. Dictator, arrogant, those things.
Well,
it doesn't accord with my experience.
You yourself have not been, I mean, your reputation is one of plain speaking, and in this campaign you yourself have had a go at Neil Kinnock. I think you accused him of running away. Some people might have said that was personal abuse.
No, not at all. I was echoing what I think every member of the press corps had found, that it was extremely difficult to corner him and ask him a straight question. Even more difficult to get a straight answer. His technique of having very few press conferences in London and rushing off to the provinces, hoping to dodge the really smarter chaps like yourself and other inquisitors. One which the Prime Minister hasn't adopted. She's there, she'll take any question from anybody. Not at all arrogant.
It's a perfectly legitimate tactic of the opposition, though, to point to what they see as the Prime Minister's autocratic style, in a way that very few of her cabinet ministers have survived the full course.
It's up to them how they put out their case. But cabinet ministers survive the course?
How many have?
Well, hold on a moment, Adam. How many Labour Party front bench spokesmen are the same as they were 8 years ago? Now we hear the latest stories that Mr. Shaw feels that he couldn't serve in a unilateralist government. I mean, Hattersley and Healey both swore that they couldn't and now swore they can. But there's a lot of people. What about Varley? Where's he gone to? Why did he leave? What about Reg Prentice?
It's a little bit different in opposition. I mean, for instance, one of the things that have lent some substance to this charge, or run some confirmation, at least so far as the opposition see it, is you have a senior cabinet minister, Mr. Biffin, apparently in exile in Shropshire, saying he'd sooner leave on his feet than crawl on his knees. Now that suggests that he thinks that some of his predecessors have gone out in the wrong posture.
Biffo has always been the oracle of Oswestry, and sometimes what he says is as difficult to interpret. He's got his own way of saying things. But on the other hand, you get this rather silly Kinnock thing today, didn't you? That we're all sycophants and doormats. I'm not sure that Mr. Kinnock actually sees me as a doormat. That's not the way he's usually presented me, nor Mr. Lawson either as Chancellor of the Exchequer. And it's pretty pathetic, that sort of thing. And after all, they're talking about a British Prime Minister. A British Prime Minister, actually, who's shown a great deal of determination and a very great deal of spine, who's stood up for British interests. Remember when she went to renegotiate the terms of our financial contributions to the European community? The Labour Party said it couldn't be done, and she went out there and did it. Now the thing is, do you want a soft touch in those negotiations, or do you want a tough person?
I would think you would accept she's not an easy person. She is a very, very tough character. She may be a splendid person to send over the trenches.
I don't find her difficult.
You have at times. There have been moments, obviously, of tension between you. Obviously, between colleagues, they're bound to be.
Well, of course, we could have a disagreement about something, but that's always resolved, and it's not always one or the other of us that has the last word. She's a person who is very tough on someone that comes to her with a poorly thought out or half-baked scheme. If you've got a good point to make and you make it clearly and you're well briefed, then you can win your argument with the Prime Minister. She's only too happy about that.
Hasn't she left herself to some extent vulnerable? When she came into office, she quoted that famous St. Francis quote about bringing the nation together. And Jim Pryor, in his book, described that as total humbug, because her style is not one of compromise, it is one of confrontation.
Yes, I'd like to take you up on that. What was the situation when she came into office? It was in the wake of the winter of discontent, when our hospitals had been closed, schools had been closed, cancer patients sent back from hospital by uncaring trades unions. What have we got now? We've got the best industrial relations we've had for more than 50 years. She, through the legislation she has enacted, she, through her leadership, our economic policies, have brought together both sides of industry so that our industrial relations are now the envy of many countries. Now, isn't that bringing people together?
Would you not accept that this election is, to some extent, a presidential election, whether we like it or not, and that voters will be choosing between two very differing styles, the leadership style of the Prime Minister and the very contrasting style offered by Neil Kinnock, and I suppose to a lesser extent by the two alliance leaders?
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. What we've got is the style of the Prime Minister which is known, which is clear, which is open, and which is frank. And we've got something of a presidential election in the way that Mr. Kinnock has been packaged up and presented as something which he actually isn't. And I think that's the most interesting part, in the same way that their Labour policies have been presented as things that they aren't. Ours are presented openly. The only thing that the Labour Party can do about ours is to lie about them. For example, their charge this evening on their PPB, that the new government-maintained schools would charge fees. It's a lie, they know it's a lie, and they keep on saying it. It's a pity we can't get down to discussing the policies, and we have to go through this process of mudslinging and lying.